Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In today's video, I'll be responding to the SaskDutch Kid once again. You might remember my last video on this dairy farmer slash YouTuber where he claimed artificial insemination is not rape. In this video, we'll be tackling his claims made in the video, what happens to bull calves on our dairy farm.
In the last video, I took a calf from this close-up pen and brought it to the calf barn. And because it was a bull calf, I saw a couple of comments saying, oh, this calf's gonna be killed right away on the dairy farm, because dairy farms don't keep their bull calves. They just send them right away to veal, or they just kill it on the farm and right away this calf is gonna die. But that isn't the case, and today we're gonna be talking about that.
Well, that might not be the case in every scenario on every single dairy farm, but when we look at this generally, bull calves are culled shortly after birth. Like here in the UK, where a recent Guardian investigation found around 95,000 bull calves are shot soon after birth each year. This is generally because of the lack of demand for veal, and it is cheaper and less work for farmers to kill the bobby calves rather than find space to keep them, raise them, and then sell them off. In New Zealand, for instance, an estimated 40% of male dairy calves are currently disposed of after birth, and in Australia, around 800,000 bobby calves are murdered as a waste product of the dairy industry every year. But in places like Canada, where the SaskDutch Kid lives, the dairy industry will mainly supply their bull calves to the veal industry. Ontario and Quebec are the largest Canadian producers of veal because they also have the greatest number of dairy farms. Combined, Ontario and Quebec account for approximately 97% of Canada's veal production. This is somewhere around 300,000 veal calves per year. Of course, in some cases, bull calves might be raised for beef as well, but it's just not financially viable for many dairy farms. Here we go, look at these infant prisoners kept in confinement, away from their mother. Cows are maternal animals, and research shows that mother and calf develop strong emotional bonds soon after birth. But by this time, the SaskDutch Kid has come past with his wheelbarrow to separate their family and imprison the calf in a tiny cell.
So the little buggers here with the blue ear tags, these guys are bulls or steers. We castrate them and then they become a steer.
Okay, so it looks like he castrates them to be raised as a beef steer. Although Canada's guidelines require the use of pain control, many other countries including the US, UK and Australia do not require farmers to use pain relief on infant calves when it comes to castration. I wonder if the Canadian farmers would even use the pain relief if it wasn't a legal requirement. Well, I think we can just gauge off the other farms that don't.
So all the bull calves, we castrate them and they become steers, and we treat them the exact same as a heifer calf on our dairy farm here. We do raise them right to finish, 1,500 pounds.
Okay, so he raises them on his dairy farm all the way to finish, which is quite unusual, but SaskDutch Kid likes to act like this is a standard procedure worldwide.
And then we send them to a packing plant and they become some nice juicy steaks.
You send them to a packing plant? Don't you mean a murder factory where they're shot in the head and have their throats slashed open and are sliced up into pieces? So at your particular farm, you don't kill them immediately, you wait a year and kill them when you can maximise profits for their flesh. That's so much better.
And they become some nice juicy steaks.
Just listen to the disconnect and the euphemistic language and his casual attitude towards the murder of these animals. Imagine the betrayal in the eyes of the animals when they realise the one who bottle fed them and looked after them was also the same person to send them to their brutal death.
Dairy farms don't just kill their bull calves. That would be such a waste to just kill them right away, and it would be pretty sad.
Well, your dairy farm doesn't. As I said, in places like the UK, Australia or New Zealand, it's quite common. The methods for euthanasia, as they call it, are either a gunshot or captive bolt pistol to the head. Another method of killing is blunt force trauma. Although there's been a move to ban this practice in many countries, it is still generally allowed if the calf is under a day old and there's no other practical alternative. But I guess that's up to the farmer's discretion though. Right? It's hard to track the true number of dairy calves killed on farms who are not raised for veal, as farmers are not required to report the deaths of calves who are killed within a few days of birth. Let's take a look at Canada, where SaskDutch Kid is from. In this Canadian study, where a total of 1,025 surveys were completed representing 9% of all dairy farms in Canada, of the 5% who had euthanized at least one calf in the previous year, blunt force trauma was the method most commonly used. Just keep in mind this was a survey, so it relies on the honesty of the farmers. Who knows what's going on the farms who refuse to take part? That is what independent animal rights investigations are for.
And that would be such a waste to just kill them right away, and it would be pretty sad.
So where he says it would be such a waste to kill them straight away and pretty sad, it's sad to kill them young, but it's not sad to wait a year later and kill them anyway. Okay? And of course when he says waste, he doesn't mean a waste of life, he means a waste of money. Dairy farming is just another business after all.
What most dairy farms do, they sell them to a feedlot where the guys there will raise these calves right to finish.
Well, most dairy farms in Canada will actually send them off to the veal industry, which is basically the baby cow flesh industry. Much better than shooting them on the farm after birth, right?
For a lot of farms, it wouldn't make sense to keep their bull calves because they need to make quite a few investments to feed them outright to finish. But for us, it was pretty cheap.
Okay, so here is acknowledging that it wouldn't make sense. or dollars to keep the bull calves, as it's not economically viable, which is exactly why many farmers around the world might kill them on the farm. Maybe SaskDutch Kid doesn't understand that when vegans discuss the dairy industry, we're speaking usually in general terms which reflect the entire industry. Yeah, some farms might raise them for beef, but some also kill them soon after birth, or send them off to be murdered in the veal industry. Either way, the dairy industry is a horror show for animals when none of them make it out alive.
This is our roller mill where we roll barley. There's whole barley in there. It goes through the roller mill in here.
So look at those massive silos full of food and resources. On a planet where around 842 million people suffer from hunger, this guy is using all these resources to feed dairy cows so people can drink breast milk and eat baby cow flesh.
The other really expensive thing for a lot of farms would be feed or forage, silage or hay or other stuff to feed to them other than grain. And that takes a lot of land to grow all that feed. So if you don't have enough land, only enough land to grow feed for the milk cows, it might be a really big expense to find feed to feed those steers. But we have 2,100 acres and we can basically keep chopping up our crops until we have enough silage to feed however many cows we have on the yard, which means we can get pretty cheap feed. So that's another thing that is kind of a benefit to us.
2,100 acres of land? Wow. This is how much land a dairy farm with only 300 cows needs? People who say dairy is sustainable are telling fairy tales. Imagine how many potatoes you could grow on 2,100 acres. I think it's somewhere around 16 to 28 tonnes per acre. So for 2,100 acres, that's between 33,600 and 58,800 tonnes of potatoes. That's potentially 58.8 million kilograms of potatoes. Do the math on that. You could potentially feed a small country. Here he is dumping 1 tonne of barley into the feed mixer. That's about 350,000 calories of grain. So here he's got half a tonne of DDGS. I think they're distiller grains, which are a cereal byproduct of the distilling process.
So that was the minerals. It's kind of like the vitamins for the milk cows.
Here he is dumping 100 kilograms of minerals, vitamins, and maybe some supplements. You know how the dairy industry is just so natural. This whole place is just one big natural intensive farm. You know, just like a lion. How they live according to nature. That's why humans drink cow's milk, because it's natural. Here we go, 120 kilograms of rolled canola, because you know how we can get those omega-3s from plants. So here he is dumping in a bunch of silage, which I'll grant is not consumable for humans. But 3,500 kilograms of barley silage, that's a lot of crop deaths there. Just a little joke for those of you who criticise vegans for causing crop deaths. Hardly an argument against veganism when this amount of harvested plant matter is being fed to the animals you eat and drink milk from. Even though a large amount of what animals eat is generally not consumable for humans, so much of that land could be used to grow edible crops. This study, which came out of Oxford University, found that 83% of farmland is used for animal agriculture but provides only 18% of our calories. And we could reduce this farmland by 75% if we all adopted a vegan diet. And here he is dumping 1,500 litres of water into the feed. Speaking of water, how much water do you think a dairy cow will drink over the course of their life? Well, this source says 68 to 155 litres a day, let alone the amount of water used to grow the crops these animals eat. Fresh water is a valuable resource which is being squandered away for resource-intensive animal products. Look at the worldwide cattle inventory numbers, at almost 1 billion, and dairy cows at 278 million in 2017. How on earth is this sustainable? Look at the size of his slave farm. Well, of course the environmental harm of these places is an issue that affects us all, but from the animal's perspective, the main issue is this horrific rights violation. The SaskDutch Kid can try to justify this gross mistreatment of sentient life all he wants, and the fact that he raises his calves for beef before he kills them does not justify nor cancel out any of the other disgraceful practices of dairy farming. The fact is, the dairy industry do mass murder infant animals across the world. The dairy industry systematically sexually violates male and female animals. The dairy industry abducts infants and separates families, and the dairy industry murder every single animal on their farm for their flesh eventually. So please help to boycott these industries by choosing one of the many plant-based products on the market. Together we can leave the dairy industry where it belongs, in the past, as a dark part of history. Thanks for watching.